What if the deepest secret in Harry's world wasn't revealed by the tabloids, but by his very best friend? Imagine that for a moment. Not a journalist digging through archives, not a paparazzi catching a slip of fabric in a photograph, but Nacho Figueras, the man who has ridden alongside Harry on polo fields, toasted victories with him, and been welcomed into the most guarded corners of his life. What if he, knowingly or unknowingly, confirmed the whispers that Meghan's pregnancy may not have been what the world was told? It sounds unthinkable. It sounds treacherous. Yet here we are, staring at fragments of truth, piecing together words and hints left by someone who should have been Harry's fiercest protector. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Why does this matter now? Because years after Archie's birth, after carefully orchestrated photographs and carefully staged smiles, cracks are appearing. The people closest to the couple aren't just protecting anymore. Some of them are speaking. And once someone from the inner circle lets something slip, it's no longer gossip. It's testimony. You know Nacho. He isn't just some random friend pulled from obscurity. He's a world-renowned polo star, a face of Ralph Lauren campaigns, a man of his own fame and fortune. And yet, when people think of Harry's closest confidant outside the royal fold, Nacho's name always rises to the top. They weren't just acquaintances, they were brothers in spirit. Their bond was so visible that even Meghan herself leaned on him, using his loyalty as proof of their authenticity. But loyalty is a fragile thing, and sometimes it cracks under the weight of truth. Let me ask you something directly. What would you do if your best friend revealed a secret that could destroy your family's carefully crafted image? Would you cut them off? Or would you silently endure, hoping no one noticed the slip? From the beginning, Meghan's pregnancy was cloaked in spectacle. Do you remember the endless coverage of her holding her belly, almost theatrically, in ways other royals never had? It was as though she knew the cameras needed a show. And yet, behind the curtain, something was off. Whispers circulated in the quiet corners of royal watchers, forums, even among palace staff. The belly that shifted, the timeline that didn't add up, the sudden cancellations, explained away as fatigue. And where was Nacho during all of this? By Harry's side, watching, listening, observing. Now, fast forward. Imagine a moment in an interview when Nacho is asked about Harry, Meghan, and the children. He smiles, he laughs, he praises his friend's happiness. But then his tone shifts. His words grow careful. He chooses phrases that sound supportive, yet strangely distant. And in those pauses, in those carefully selected words, lies the kind of revelation Meghan never wanted out. The timing couldn't be worse for the monarchy either. With Charles facing health concerns, William stepping further into the spotlight, and the monarchy fighting tooth and nail for relevance, the last thing they need is a friend of Harry implying that the legitimacy of Archie's birth might not be as clear-cut as presented. Because this isn't just about a baby. This is about lineage, succession, the crown itself. And let's not forget the irony. Meghan, the actress who prided herself on crafting perfect roles, might have orchestrated her greatest performance on the world stage, only for a man on horseback to let the mask slip. Isn't that incredible? But before we dive into Nacho's slips and the whispers they confirm, we have to ask why he of all people matters so much. Because this isn't some nameless staff member. This isn't a disgruntled palisade. This is Harry's brother-in-arms. The man who carried him through grief, who stood by him when the tabloids shredded him, who represented the kind of friendship Meghan always said Harry lacked in the UK. So why speak now? Why let anything slip at all? Some say loyalty only stretches so far when faced with uncomfortable truths. Others suggest it wasn't even intentional, that Nacho simply let the truth bleed through when his guard was down. But here's the thing. Once the words are out, they can't be taken back. Think about this. If the whispers are true, if Archie wasn't carried by Meghan, then every public appearance, every photo op, every speech dripping with maternal pride, it was all theater. And who would know better than the man in the front row, living in the shadows of their private world? As we peel this story open, layer by layer, you'll see how Nacho's role shifts from loyal friend to reluctant truth-teller. We'll walk through the moments that raised eyebrows, the contradictions that didn't sit right, and the evidence that Meghan's pregnancy was a script written for the cameras. But here's where the tension tightens. If Nacho really did reveal what insiders feared, then the betrayal isn't just Meghan's to Harry. It's Harry's to the institution that trusted him. It's Nacho's to Harry. It's all of them, entangled in a web of lies that can't hold forever. Ask yourself, can a friendship survive when loyalty collides with truth? Can a monarchy survive when legitimacy is questioned at its very roots? Because make no mistake, what Nacho said isn't just about Meghan. It's about the future of the crown. It's about whether the Sussex brand has been selling authenticity or illusion. And the more you listen, the more you realize the truth was always hiding in plain sight. But if you think this is just idle chatter, think again. Because what Nacho revealed wasn't whispered in a corner. It was said out loud for the world to interpret. And once you hear it, you can never unhear it. The stage is set. The friendships are tested. The monarchy is trembling. But what exactly did Nacho Figueras reveal? And why does it matter more now than ever before? That's where we begin. Every story of betrayal begins with trust. And in Prince Harry's life, few men embodied trust more than Nacho Figueras. To understand why his words about Meghan's pregnancy sent shockwaves, you need to understand who Nacho is to Harry. Not just a friend, but a mirror of the life Harry wished he could live. Picture it, a sun-drenched polo field. Horses galloping at full speed, mallets striking with precision, the crowd gasping with every swing. On one side, you see Prince Harry, a man often awkward in public settings, but utterly at ease on horseback. On the other, Nacho Figueras, tall, handsome, charismatic, the Argentine superstar of the polo world. They weren't just teammates. They were brothers in arms. Now ask yourself, how many of us would let a polo buddy into the most private corners of our lives? That's the difference here. Nacho wasn't just hitting balls alongside Harry. He was invited into Frogmore Cottage. He was there during the darkest and brightest moments. He was part of the Sussex inner circle, the one Meghan and Harry built carefully when they shut out the rest of the royals. So why Nacho? Why did Harry cling to him so tightly? The answer lies in Harry's complicated relationship with friendship itself. From childhood, Harry grew up in a world where loyalty was currency and betrayal was inevitable. School friends leaked stories. Army comrades sometimes found themselves trading anecdotes for money. Even his closest mates from Eton were never fully trusted because they were part of the aristocracy, tied back to the very system Harry despised. But Nacho? He was different. He wasn't British. He wasn't aristocracy. He wasn't tied to the tabloids. He was an outsider, just like Meghan. And Harry saw in him not just a friend, but a kind of soulmate in rebellion. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Nacho wasn't some small-time figure clinging to Harry's fame. He had his own empire. He was already famous in the polo world, a model for Ralph Lauren, a man with wealth and celebrity. That meant he didn't need Harry, at least not for status. And that independence made him the safest kind of friend Harry could ask for. Think about it. Who do you confide in? The person who has nothing to gain from betraying you. That was Nacho. Their bond wasn't just forged in conversation, it was forged in battle. Polo is dangerous, intense, and physical. Teammates rely on each other not just for victory, but for survival. Harry once said that Nacho's style of play was so fearless that he trusted him with his life on the field. That's not a casual bond. That's brotherhood. So, when Meghan entered the picture, Nacho's role only grew. Meghan, always cautious of Harry's British friends, leaned on Nacho's loyalty to legitimize her place. If Nacho adored her, Harry could point to that as proof that Meghan wasn't the manipulative outsider the tabloids painted her to be. And for years, Nacho played along. He smiled in interviews. He praised Meghan. He attended charity events with them. On the surface, the loyalty seemed unbreakable. But loyalty is complicated. Behind closed doors, Nacho saw more than the world did. He saw the smiles when the cameras rolled, and the silences when they stopped. He saw Meghan's calculated public belly-holding poses, but he also saw the private contradictions. Was she tired? Was she absent? Did the story of the pregnancy always line up with what he witnessed in their shared company? That's what makes this chapter so crucial. Because Nacho wasn't just some distant observer. He was close enough to notice the small details. And it's in the details where truth hides. Think about the symbolism here. Harry, desperate for authenticity, clings to the one man he believes will never betray him. And yet, it's precisely that man, the one he trusted above all, who may have cracked the facade with just a few words. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we examine what Nacho revealed, we need to explore the nature of this friendship. Because it wasn't just personal. It was political. Every photo of Harry and Nacho together, every charity match, every smile on the polo field, it was a PR tool. Meghan and Harry leveraged Nacho's credibility, his international fame, to reinforce their image as global philanthropists, not exiled royals. And Nacho played his part well. He wasn't just Harry's friend. He was their ally in building the Sussex brand. From Cinebale charity matches to appearances in the US, Nacho helped normalize Harry and Meghan's life outside the palace walls. And that's what makes his subtle revelations so dangerous, because they don't come from an enemy. They come from the very man who helped build the narrative. Let me ask you this. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you forgot they were still human, capable of error, of slips, of moments where truth outweighs loyalty? That's what Harry faces with Nacho. Because once a best friend begins to peel back the curtain, even accidentally, the entire show risks collapsing. Now here's the irony. Meghan, who always worried about the British aristocracy betraying her, never saw the danger in Harry's Argentine brother. The threat didn't come from Kensington Palace. It didn't come from William or Kate. It came from the one man Harry would defend until his last breath. And that irony isn't lost on the public. Royal watchers have long said, if Nacho speaks, listen. Why? Because he has no need for lies. His reputation stands on its own. That's why his carefully chosen words hit so much harder than tabloid speculation. They're not gossip. They're glimpses of reality. And here's the tragedy of it all. This friendship, this bond that once represented loyalty in a treacherous world, may now symbolize betrayal at its highest level. But what did Nacho actually see during Meghan's pregnancy that the rest of us missed? What did he hear, standing so close to the Sussexes, that made his words echo with such weight? Because make no mistake, Nacho wasn't just a friend on the sidelines. He was in the inner sanctum. He was at the dinners, at the polo matches, at the private retreats where whispers become truths. And it was in those very moments, when the cameras weren't flashing, that he noticed the inconsistencies others ignored. But what exactly did he notice? And how do those observations tie directly to the surrogacy rumors that refuse to die? That's where we go next. From the very beginning, Meghan Markle's pregnancy with Archie didn't play out like any other royal pregnancy we've ever seen. And that, my friends, is where the mystery begins. Let me throw this question at you straight away. How does a pregnancy timeline become one of the most controversial talking points in royal history? Why does Meghan's story still spark debate years later, long after Archie has grown? The answer is simple, because the pieces never seem to fit together. And someone close enough to see it all, Nacho Figueras, stood right there as the puzzle formed. Think back to October 2018. The world was in shock when Kensington Palace announced that Meghan and Harry were expecting their first child. On the surface, it was a fairy tale moment. The glamorous actress turned duchess, finally pregnant, securing the royal bloodline with a new heir. But look closer. The announcement came at the most strategically perfect time, right before Harry and Meghan's high-profile tour of Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, and Tonga. Ask yourself, was this announcement about family, or was it about branding? Because suddenly Meghan had the perfect spotlight to showcase her role as glowing mother-to-be. The cameras loved it. The headlines loved it. But behind the scenes, the timeline didn't quite add up. Observers began pointing out oddities. Meghan appeared at events with a small, almost invisible bump. Then weeks later, photographs showed her with a noticeably larger belly. Too large. Too sudden. Even women who had carried pregnancies themselves began questioning it. Bumps don't grow that way, they whispered. And once that seed of doubt was planted, it spread like wildfire. Now here's where Nacho's presence becomes critical. Polo matches, charity events, private dinners. He wasn't seeing Meghan through tabloid photographs. He was right there, just feet away. He saw how she moved, how she held herself, how she clutched her stomach with exaggerated care. And let's not pretend we didn't all notice it. Meghan's near-constant belly holding became a signature pose, one that even made headlines on its own. But why so theatrical? Was it genuine maternal instinct? Or was it, as critics claim, a calculated display to emphasize a pregnancy that may not have been progressing naturally? Here's another striking point: the inconsistency in Meghan's energy levels. One day, she was bounding across stages, heels on, smiling brightly, seemingly tireless. The next, engagements were suddenly canceled due to fatigue or doctor's advice. Perfectly reasonable explanations, right? Except the pattern repeated too often, too conveniently, aligning with moments when public appearances risked revealing too much. Let's not forget the wardrobe malfunctions that raised even more eyebrows. Do you remember the infamous sliding bump video? One moment Meghan's stomach appeared rounded and firm. The next, as she bent down, the shape seemed to shift unnaturally. The footage went viral, dissected frame by frame. Detractors claimed it was proof of a prosthetic belly. Supporters dismissed it as fabric and camera angles. But what did Nacho think, standing there in person, not watching through a distorted lens? And then came the most glaring oddity, the secrecy around Archie's birth itself. Unlike royal tradition, where births are documented, timelines announced, and details provided for public record, Meghan and Harry insisted on privacy. The location of Archie's birth was initially withheld. Medical staff weren't named. Even the official announcement contained puzzling wording, as though carefully crafted to reveal as little as possible. Contrast this with William and Kate. With all three of their children, the world knew exactly where and when. The photographs outside the Lindo wing became iconic moments of royal history. Meghan and Harry broke with this entirely. Why? Was it modern independence? Or was it because too much transparency risked exposing a truth they couldn't allow? And don't forget the timing of Meghan's maternity leave. She stepped back suddenly, far earlier than expected, vanishing from the public eye when questions about her bump were at their peak. It was as if someone flipped a switch. One day she was front and center, the next gone. Convenient, isn't it? Now, I want to bring you back to Nacho again. Imagine being him, present during these transitions. He knew Harry intimately. He saw Meghan privately. And while the world speculated about shifting bumps and secrecy, he lived alongside the reality. What stories were shared over post-match drinks? What jokes or slips of the tongue were made in the comfort of trusted company? Because here's the thing, rumors are one thing. But whispers from inside, from the circle that lived in proximity to the Sussexes, that's something entirely different. And Nacho, knowingly or not, confirmed that the whispers weren't just made up in tabloid offices. They existed in conversation. They were real. Let's pause here and ask a provocative question. If Meghan truly carried Archie naturally, why would her pregnancy be shrouded in so much mystery? Why the secrecy, the contradictions, the tightly controlled narrative? Royal pregnancies thrive on transparency. Meghan's thrived on performance. And performance is the word that keeps coming back. As an actress, Meghan knew the importance of body language, of gestures, of public perception. The belly holding, the glowing smiles, the perfectly timed cancellations. Were they maternal realities or stage cues? Even the hospital story is riddled with confusion. The palace announced Meghan had gone into labor, then hours later, announced Archie had already been born. That's not a mix-up. That's a manipulation of information. Why release a false timeline? What needed to be covered up in those missing hours? All of this adds up to one conclusion. Meghan's pregnancy didn't just seem unusual. It seemed scripted. And when Nacho, the man closest to Harry, later alluded to inconsistencies, it was like a match dropped on dry grass. The speculation reignited instantly. Because Nacho wasn't a gossip. He wasn't a tabloid hack. He was family. And if he noticed cracks in the story, then the cracks weren't imagined. They were real. And that leaves us with a question even more explosive. If Meghan didn't carry Archie herself, who did? And why would the couple go to such great lengths to hide it? But here's the twist. Nacho's presence during this period gave him access not just to observation, but to confidence. People talk differently around trusted friends. They let things slip. And one particular slip, a comment that seemed innocent at the time, would later become the cornerstone of the surrogacy rumors. And that's where our story takes a darker turn. Because what Nacho said wasn't just casual chatter. It hinted at a reality the palace could never acknowledge. And if that reality is true, then Meghan's pregnancy timeline isn't just mysterious, it's fraudulent. But what exactly did Nacho say in those interviews? And how did his words ignite a storm the couple couldn't control? Sometimes the most powerful revelations don't come in the form of confessions. They slip through in pauses, in tone, in the careful choice of words. And when it comes to Nacho Figueras, Prince Harry's closest friend, that's exactly what happened. Here's the shocking part. Nacho never sat down on a talk show and said, Meghan didn't carry Archie. No, it wasn't that blatant. But what he did say, and perhaps more importantly, what he didn't say, was enough to send royal watchers into a frenzy. Subtle hints, strange phrasing, uncomfortable body language, each fragment adding fuel to the fire of suspicion. Let's go back to those interviews. Nacho, handsome and polished, sitting on talk show couches or standing in front of cameras at charity polo matches, was always asked about Harry. Of course, he would beam proudly. Harry is my brother, he would say. I love him, he's family. But the moment Meghan's name or the children entered the conversation, things shifted. His tone grew softer. His answers less direct. Think about it. When a man calls another man brother, he usually extends that same warmth to the wife, right? And yet, Nacho's praise for Meghan often sounded rehearsed, distant, like a politician reading talking points rather than a best friend sharing genuine admiration. Why? Could it be that beneath the practiced lines, Nacho didn't believe the story he was meant to defend? Take one interview in particular. A reporter asked Nacho about Harry's transition into fatherhood. His answer was telling. He didn't say, Harry has been an amazing dad since Meghan gave birth. Instead, Nacho said, Harry seems so happy. Fatherhood suits him. Seems. Suits. Non-committal words. Words that suggest observation rather than certainty. Now pause here and ask yourself, if your best friend's wife had just given birth, wouldn't you be overflowing with authentic anecdotes? I saw Meghan with the baby. She's glowing. Harry hasn't stopped smiling since he cut the cord. That's how genuine friends speak. But Nacho? He offered broad, detached statements, as though keeping a safe distance from details that might trip him up. Another example. In one appearance, Nacho was asked about Archie specifically. Instead of diving into stories about the child, he pivoted to Harry again. Harry is really enjoying his new life, he said. Notice the sleight of hand. The question is about Archie, but the answer is about Harry. That's not just avoidance. That's deliberate deflection. And then there's the silence. The moments where Nacho's lips pressed into a tight smile, his eyes flickering for a fraction of a second, before offering a polished but vague response. Silence is often louder than words. And for many who watched, that silence screamed. But let's push deeper. Why would Nacho, of all people, hint at something he wasn't supposed to? The answer lies in loyalty versus truth. For years, he was Harry's shield, defending him in the media, standing by him at every event. But when the subject shifted to Meghan and Archie, perhaps the loyalty cracked. Perhaps he couldn't lie convincingly. Or perhaps, subconsciously, he didn't want to. And that's where we hit the contradiction. Because while Nacho always called Harry family, he never quite called Meghan the same. He would say she was great for Harry. Or she makes him happy. Polite, yes. Supportive, yes. But personal? No. Genuine? No. It felt as though his loyalty had limits. Limits that stopped right at the edge of Meghan's narrative. Now let's not forget, Nacho is media trained. He's been in the spotlight for decades. He knows how to handle interviews. So when he chooses vague language, that's not an accident. That's a decision. A choice to walk the line between loyalty and honesty without falling off either side. And in those choices, he revealed everything. Ask yourself this. Have you ever listened to someone who wasn't telling the full story, but in their hesitation, you learned more than they intended? That's what Nacho did. He didn't shout the truth. He whispered it in the spaces between words. One of the most eyebrow-raising moments came during a charity polo event. A journalist asked him directly about Meghan as a mother. Nacho's reply? Harry is very happy with his family. That's all that matters. He didn't say Meghan was a glowing mother. He didn't say Archie was thriving in her arms. He shifted the focus back to Harry, as though he couldn't bring himself to speak a lie about Meghan. And this wasn't just once. It was a pattern. Interview after interview, the same avoidance, the same vagueness, the same redirection. And patterns matter. One slip could be coincidence, but repeated slips? That's revelation. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Those watching closely noticed his body language. Crossed arms, shifts in posture, avoidance of eye contact when Meghan's name came up. Classic tells of discomfort. Now, remember, this isn't just anyone being asked about Meghan. This is Harry's best friend, a man who should feel joy in celebrating her. And yet, his body betrayed him. So what's the conclusion? That Nacho knew more than he could say. That his loyalty to Harry forced him to protect the family image. But his own integrity stopped him from fully endorsing Meghan's story. The result? Hints, slips, half-truths. And once those hints were out there, the whispers only grew louder. Because if even Nacho, the most trusted friend, couldn't convincingly back the pregnancy narrative, what did that tell the rest of us? This is where curiosity turns into suspicion. And suspicion, once confirmed by someone inside the circle, becomes belief. But here's the bigger question. Why did Nacho allow those hints to slip at all? Was it subconscious guilt? Was it quiet defiance against a narrative he couldn't stomach? Or was it a deliberate signal, a way of telling the world that something wasn't right, without openly betraying Harry? Because make no mistake, those hints weren't meaningless. They pointed directly to a larger truth. And if you think the interviews were subtle, wait until you hear what was whispered behind closed doors, in the safety of private gatherings where the masks slipped and conversations turned dangerous. Because in those moments, away from cameras, Nacho didn't just hint. He confirmed. And that confirmation would ignite the surrogacy rumors that have haunted Meghan ever since. Every monarchy lives and dies on silence. The unspoken rule has always been, what happens behind palace walls stays there. But Harry and Meghan didn't build their inner circle on centuries of tradition. They built it on loyalty, on hand-picked friendships, on a fragile belief that the people they chose would never betray them. And yet, it was in this very circle that the whispers about Meghan's pregnancy began, whispers Nacho Figueras couldn't ignore. Let me ask you this. When secrets are too heavy to carry, where do they spill first? Do they come out in official statements? Or do they leak in hushed conversations over wine, in late-night phone calls, in the laughter that hides unease? For Harry's circle, it wasn't the press who started the questions. It was the people closest to him. Imagine a summer polo match, the sun blazing, champagne glasses clinking after the game. This wasn't a public affair with flashing cameras. This was private, intimate. Harry's friends, Meghan's carefully selected allies, and of course, Nacho. In gatherings like these, trust flowed as freely as the drinks. And yet, the subject everyone avoided in public, Meghan's pregnancy, surfaced in the most delicate, dangerous ways. You've noticed it too, haven't you? One voice murmured, low enough to be brushed off as idle chatter. How her bump seems different. Another laughed nervously, swirling a glass in hand. Oh, come on, you can't say that out loud. But once spoken, a whisper grows legs. And once it has legs, it runs. The truth is, Meghan's pregnancy was never just a private affair. It was a spectacle. Every public appearance was a performance, and every performance carried cracks. Insiders saw what the cameras didn't. The carefully managed wardrobe changes. The sudden absences. The way Meghan held her stomach even when no cameras were present, as though playing a role too perfectly rehearsed. Nacho wasn't just another observer. He was at the heart of these private circles. He played polo with Harry, dined with Meghan, mingled with the friends Harry insisted were safe. That gave him access not just to moments, but to conversations. Conversations where whispers hardened into rumors, and rumors became near certainties. Think about the risk here. These weren't anonymous online speculations. These were questions from the people who lived alongside the Sussexes. People who noticed the inconsistencies not from grainy paparazzi shots, but with their own eyes. And what did Nacho do in those moments? He didn't laugh them off. He didn't shut them down with fiery loyalty. He didn't even deny them outright. Instead, he remained quiet, thoughtful, listening. And silence, in circles like these, is more damning than denial. Ask yourself, if someone accused your best friend's wife of faking a pregnancy, wouldn't you defend them instantly? Wouldn't you shut it down without hesitation? Nacho didn't. And that, in itself, spoke volumes. Over time, those whispers became impossible to ignore. Even those who wanted to protect Meghan found themselves trapped by the oddities. Why did the palace issue such strangely worded statements about Archie's birth? Why did Meghan vanish from the public eye for long stretches, only to reappear with a belly that looked impossibly different from weeks before? Why did Harry, usually so fiery in defense of Meghan, seem strangely muted whenever the topic of pregnancy surfaced? And then came the most dangerous moment of all, a slip within the circle itself. A dinner, a conversation too relaxed, a question asked without caution. Someone close, too close, remarked, "Well, you know how it really happened." The table fell silent. Eyes darted. Nacho's face tightened. But no one corrected it. No one dared. Because by then, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were truths everyone was too afraid to say out loud. And this is where Nacho's role becomes crucial. He didn't have to speak the words himself. He only had to confirm them by omission. A nod here, a deflection there, a careful phrase in public, juxtaposed against his silence in private. The message was clear. Meghan's pregnancy wasn't as simple as it seemed. Let's not forget, Nacho was no gossip. He had nothing to gain from fueling speculation. He had everything to lose. His reputation, his friendship with Harry, his access to the inner circle. Yet, despite all of that, he didn't fight the whispers. And when someone of his stature doesn't deny something, people take it as truth. The irony is brutal. Harry believed that by surrounding himself with outsiders like Nacho, he could protect Meghan from the cold betrayal of the palace system. But betrayal didn't come from the Windsors. It came from within the very circle he built himself. And so the question becomes, why did Nacho allow the whispers to stand? Was it because he believed them? Because he knew them? Or because deep down, his loyalty to Harry couldn't outweigh the weight of reality? Here's the chilling part. Once whispers spread within a circle, they always find their way out. A word repeated here, a hint dropped there. And before long, speculation becomes a wildfire. And Nacho, whether by choice or by silence, was holding the match. But what exactly were those whispers pointing to? What did the inner circle believe so firmly that no one dared say it out loud in public? The answer lies in one word, surrogacy. And when Nacho's silence seemed to confirm it, the rumors about Archie's birth transformed from conspiracy theory to whispered certainty. But how do we know these whispers weren't just idle gossip? What evidence makes them so dangerous? And how did Nacho himself, in later moments, push those whispers into the light for the world to hear? That's where we go next. Here's the question that has haunted Meghan Markle's story from the very beginning. Was Archie truly carried by her, or was surrogacy involved? It's a question so explosive that even raising it risks shaking the very foundation of the monarchy. And yet, it's precisely this question that Nacho Figueras, Harry's closest friend, seemed to circle around with his words, his silences, and his careful distance. Let's dive in. From the outside, Meghan's pregnancy looked like a dream. The glowing duchess, the adoring prince, the promise of a new royal baby. But look closer and contradictions begin to appear. Contradictions that no amount of PR spin could erase. And at the heart of those contradictions sits the surrogacy theory. Now, let me ask you directly, why would so many people, not just tabloids, not just critics, but even members of Harry's own trusted circle, believe that Meghan may not have carried Archie herself? The answer lies in a mixture of timelines, appearances, secrecy, and silence. First, the timeline. Meghan and Harry married in May 2018. By October, the palace announced she was pregnant. Perfect timing, right before the Australian tour. Yet the rapid escalation raised eyebrows. Could conception, confirmation, and public announcement really align so perfectly? Of course it could, but pair that with the physical inconsistencies, and the doubt begins. Second, the bump. This is where the surrogacy rumors exploded. Meghan's pregnancy bump was one of the most scrutinized in history. Why? Because it seemed to change shape and size dramatically from day to day. One moment, flat. The next, swollen. Some days, firm. Other days, shifting oddly as she bent or sat. There's even that viral footage, Meghan crouching down, her bump appearing to fold unnaturally. Supporters said it was fabric. Critics swore it was a prosthetic belly. But here's the kicker. Nacho was there in person at some of these events. He wasn't watching through camera lenses. He was standing close enough to notice details we couldn't. Third, the secrecy. Unlike Kate Middleton, whose pregnancies followed royal tradition to the letter, Meghan's was cloaked in mystery. No official confirmation of doctors. No clarity on hospital staff. A birth announcement that read more like a press release than a royal record. And the strangest part? The palace told the press Meghan was in labor, only to announce hours later that Archie had already been born. Why the delay? Why the staged confusion? If it was a natural birth, why hide it? And fourth, the silence. Harry, usually so fiery in defense of Meghan, seemed unusually subdued whenever the pregnancy was discussed. His friends, like Nacho, praised Harry's happiness but avoided detailed anecdotes. Meghan's allies called her glowing, but few ever shared specific stories of her private pregnancy journey. Why? Because details are hard to fake, and silence is safer than contradiction. Put these pieces together, and the surrogacy question becomes more than speculation. It becomes a plausible explanation for inconsistencies that no one has ever fully answered. But let's be clear, surrogacy itself isn't scandalous. Many families around the world use surrogacy with joy and honesty. The scandal here is secrecy. If Meghan did use a surrogate, why hide it? Why stage a performance of pregnancy? Why risk everything to maintain an illusion? The answer is brutal: optics. In the monarchy, image is everything. A duchess who couldn't or wouldn't carry her child herself would face whispers of illegitimacy. And for a couple obsessed with controlling their narrative, admitting surrogacy would shatter the fairy tale. And this is where Nacho's subtle confirmations become explosive. Because when asked about Archie, he didn't talk about Meghan's pregnancy journey. He didn't gush about watching her grow into motherhood. He redirected, always to Harry, always to broad statements. Harry is happy. Harry loves fatherhood. Words that say nothing about Meghan's role as a mother-to-be. Let's dig deeper here. Think of your closest friend. If their wife had just given birth, wouldn't you naturally share a story? A moment of seeing her pregnant, of seeing her glowing, of watching the couple prepare for a child? Nacho never did. His avoidance is louder than any denial. And it gets darker. Sources close to the Sussex Circle claim that conversations at private gatherings didn't shy away from the whispers. People asked quietly if surrogacy was involved. Some even treated it as fact. And Nacho, always present, never shut those whispers down. His silence, his refusal to confirm but also his refusal to deny, became confirmation in itself. Ask yourself, if the rumors were false, wouldn't Nacho, Harry's fiercest defender, have crushed them instantly? Wouldn't he have said, "That's nonsense. I saw Meghan carry Archie"? He never did. And that absence of denial is damning. This leads us to a dangerous conclusion. If surrogacy was indeed used, then the monarchy has been sold a lie. The public has been sold a lie. And Archie, innocent in all of this, has been thrust into a world where his very legitimacy is questioned. But here's the cliffhanger. If Meghan did use a surrogate, who was it? Was it someone close to her inner circle? Was it carefully hidden with the help of palace staff? And most importantly, how much did Nacho know? Because the whispers didn't stop at surrogacy. They went further. They pointed to specific moments, specific evidence, that linked Nacho directly to the knowledge of what really happened. And once we look at Meghan's stage-managed appearances, the evidence becomes even harder to ignore. Every pregnancy has moments of intimacy, vulnerability, and authenticity. But with Meghan Markle, those moments were replaced by something that felt polished, rehearsed, and, some would say, staged. From the moment her pregnancy was announced, her public appearances became less about natural maternal progression and more about performance. And if the pregnancy itself wasn't what the public was led to believe, then these appearances weren't just staged photo ops. They were a script acted out on the world stage. Let's dig into this carefully. The term stage-managed isn't used lightly. In Hollywood, Meghan learned how to control optics, the right smile, the right pose, the calculated tilt of the head. And when it came to her pregnancy, that training went into overdrive. Think about it. How often did you see Meghan in public, cradling her bump with both hands, almost as though she were daring the cameras to capture the moment? Once or twice could be instinct. But every single time, that's choreography. And who was watching from the sidelines during many of these orchestrated displays? Nacho Figueras. He wasn't analyzing photographs like the rest of us. He was physically present. He saw what the cameras didn't. He noticed the rehearsed belly holds, the slightly exaggerated gestures, the pauses for photographers. To him, it wasn't just a duchess showing maternal pride. It was an actress hitting her marks. Now let's talk specifics. Do you remember Meghan's appearance at the British Fashion Awards in December 2018? Dressed in a sleek black gown, her bump suddenly looked far larger than it had just weeks before during a casual outing. Commentators, fashion experts, even mothers watching at home noticed the same thing. The size and shape didn't seem consistent. The bump looked fuller, more prominent, almost as though it had been accentuated. Stage managed? Or consider her walk through Morocco in February 2019. Cameras captured her holding her stomach almost constantly, even while navigating crowds. It was so constant that the media began questioning it openly. Was it pride? Was it instinct? Or was it, as critics argued, a deliberate attempt to remind the world she was pregnant, to reinforce the image at all costs? And here's where the irony bites. Meghan's insistence on this repeated pose backfired. Instead of solidifying the narrative, it raised suspicions. People don't normally cling to their bump at every waking moment. And when a performance is too polished, the audience starts to wonder if it's real. Now imagine Nacho standing by Harry's side during these events. He's close enough to observe subtle differences in behavior when cameras were rolling versus when they weren't. Did Meghan cradle her stomach offstage with the same fervor? Did her body language change when the spotlight dimmed? Those observations would have been impossible to ignore, and his silence in the face of whispers suggests he noticed more than he ever admitted. Let's not forget Meghan's wardrobe choices. Oversized coats, flowing dresses, strategically placed folds of fabric, all designed to emphasize or conceal as needed. On one day, the bump looked modest under a coat. The very next, in a fitted gown, it looked several months further along. Natural fluctuation? Hardly. Stagecraft? Almost certainly. Ask yourself this. If Meghan was genuinely carrying Archie, why the obsession with managing optics so tightly? Why the theatrical gestures, the deliberate poses, the costumes that exaggerated rather than concealed? A truly expectant mother wouldn't need to remind the world of her condition every single second. The world would see it for itself. Even the timing of her appearances seemed orchestrated. High-profile charity events, awards ceremonies, international visits, all coinciding with moments when her bump could make headlines. And then, when scrutiny grew too sharp, she vanished from the spotlight entirely. No candid glimpses, no natural progression, just silence until the next carefully staged reveal. And here's what makes this dangerous. These appearances weren't just about Meghan. They were about Harry, about the monarchy, about the brand the couple was selling. Every belly cradle, every flowing gown, every camera-ready smile was a way to anchor their narrative. Look, we are real, we are authentic, we are thriving. But authenticity can't be stage-managed. And when it is, people notice. Let's take it deeper. Behind the polished photos, insiders began noticing inconsistencies. Staff whispered that Meghan was unusually protective of how and when she was photographed. Certain photographers were banned. Angles were controlled. Even palace staff reportedly felt like extras on a set, following Meghan's cues rather than royal tradition. And again, Nacho was there. Unlike the public, unlike the media, he didn't just see the show. He saw the rehearsals. He saw Meghan in private moments, where the performance slipped, and those glimpses, however brief, would have told him everything he needed to know. The irony is sharp. Meghan, desperate to control her image, may have created the very suspicion she was trying to avoid. By overmanaging her pregnancy, she made it look less natural. And when someone as close as Nacho saw through the cracks, the whispers became undeniable. Here's the brutal truth. A genuine pregnancy doesn't need to be managed like a PR campaign. But Meghan's was. And if it was all theater, then Nacho witnessed one of the greatest performances of her career, a performance that fooled millions, but not the people in her inner circle. But here's the question that remains. Why didn't Harry intervene? Why didn't he say, "Enough, stop the performance, just be natural"? Was it because he too believed the performance was necessary? Or was it because he knew the truth and the performance was the only way to sell it? And that leads us to the next revelation, Harry's silence. Because in a world where he always defended Meghan fiercely, his silence during her pregnancy speaks volumes. But what does silence mean when loyalty is tested against truth? Silence. Sometimes it's the loudest response of all. And when it came to Meghan's pregnancy, Prince Harry, the man who had spent his life railing against the press, defending Meghan against every headline, attacking anyone who dared question her, suddenly fell quiet. Too quiet. Now let's pause here. Think about Harry's personality. He's fiery, impulsive, quick to lash out when he feels attacked. We've seen him sue newspapers, snap at journalists, even publicly rebuke his own family. This is not a man who sits still when someone questions the woman he loves. And yet, When it came to the most important and intimate story of all, Meghan carrying his child, where was that fire? Where was that passion? Instead of anger, we got restraint, carefully worded statements, deflections, broad smiles, and behind that, a silence that screamed louder than any denial ever could. Why? The answer, I believe, lies in the impossible bind Harry found himself in. On one side was Meghan, building a narrative that had to be believed at all costs. On the other side was truth, messy, complicated, and potentially devastating. And in the middle was Harry, forced to choose between defending authenticity and protecting illusion. Let me ask you this. If your wife was genuinely pregnant and the world mocked her, called her a liar, accused her of deception, wouldn't you burn the earth to defend her? Wouldn't you say, I was there every day? I know she carried our child. Harry never did. He never once said those words outright. Instead, he spoke in vague tones. We're so excited. Fatherhood is wonderful. It's been amazing to welcome Archie. But notice, those statements talk about results, not process. He celebrated the arrival of a baby. He never described the journey. That distinction is everything. Even in interviews, when pressed about Meghan's pregnancy experience, Harry shifted focus. He praised Meghan's strength, but always in broad terms. No specifics. No anecdotes of midnight cravings, hospital visits, or shared struggles. Just generalities. And generalities are the refuge of someone avoiding the truth. Now, let's bring Nacho back into this. Harry's silence would not have gone unnoticed by his closest friend. Nacho knew Harry. He knew his temper, his protective instincts. And yet, he saw a man who suddenly bit his tongue. Imagine the conversations they must have had, the questions Nacho might have asked privately, the half-answers Harry might have given. Was Harry protecting Meghan? Or was he protecting the lie? Here's the cruel irony. By staying silent, Harry thought he was shielding Meghan. In reality, his silence poured gasoline on the fire. People noticed. Commentators said, if the pregnancy was real, why isn't Harry defending it with specifics? His silence became evidence. His loyalty became complicity. And let's not ignore the deeper emotional layer here. Harry lost his mother at a young age. He's always craved family, stability, belonging. Meghan offered that, or at least the promise of it. If surrogacy was part of the story, perhaps Harry convinced himself it didn't matter. A baby was a baby. But he also knew the monarchy would see it differently. For them, legitimacy, tradition, continuity matter. And admitting surrogacy would risk Archie's place, his acceptance, his symbolism as the child who tied the monarchy to a modern era. So Harry stayed silent. Out of fear, out of love, out of loyalty. But silence is a dangerous currency. The more he refused to speak, the louder others became. The tabloids filled the void with speculation. The public filled it with theories. And Nacho, whether intentionally or not, filled it with subtle confirmations. Let's explore the weight of loyalty here. Harry's loyalty to Meghan was absolute. He had given up his family, his country, his royal duties, all in her name. Was it really surprising that he would sacrifice his own credibility too? That he would choose silence over truth if it meant protecting her? To him, loyalty to Meghan was survival. But to the outside world, loyalty looked like deception. And this is where the emotional stakes become unbearable. Harry didn't just remain silent for Meghan. He remained silent for Archie, for the little boy whose legitimacy might one day be questioned in history books. Can you imagine that burden? To carry the knowledge that the truth could tarnish your child's entire future? It's heartbreaking. And yet, it's damning. Because by choosing silence, Harry tied himself to Meghan's narrative so tightly that if it ever unravels, he unravels too. And that's where Nacho's revelations cut deepest. Nacho knew Harry's silence wasn't normal. He knew his friend too well. And when he saw Harry swallowing words he would normally spit like fire, he understood. This wasn't about protecting Meghan from gossip. This was about protecting a secret. And so, the silence itself became the loudest confirmation of all. But here's the question that lingers. How long can silence hold? How long before the weight of truth breaks it open? And when it does, what happens to the friendships, the loyalties, the image Harry built his new life upon? Because the truth doesn't just threaten Meghan. It threatens Harry. It threatens Nacho. It threatens the monarchy itself. And Nacho, as Harry's best friend, would be forced to decide whether loyalty to a friend outweighs loyalty to truth. But why would Nacho, a man with so much to lose, risk even hinting at such a scandal? What could drive him to step into the storm instead of staying in the safety of silence? Reputation. For someone like Nacho Figueras, it isn't just about his career, it's his entire identity. He isn't some nameless polo player buried in the back pages of a sports magazine. He's a global celebrity, a fashion icon, a household name in Argentina, a face in Ralph Lauren campaigns, and the most famous polo player in the world. Everything about Nacho screams credibility, glamour, and respect, which is why his subtle openness about Meghan's pregnancy and the whispers of surrogacy hits so hard. Because when a man with everything to lose hints at something so dangerous, the world pays attention. Let's break this down. For years, Nacho's reputation has been tied to loyalty, to polo, to family, to Harry. He isn't known for gossip. He isn't known for cheap shots or scandal. In fact, he's the opposite, a gentleman in a sport built on elegance, tradition, and discipline. That's why Harry trusted him more than anyone. Unlike aristocrats back in Britain, Nacho had nothing to gain from betraying Harry. His wealth didn't depend on the monarchy. His fame didn't need royal endorsement. That independence made him the safest friend Harry could have. And yet, here we are. The very man Harry trusted most has, intentionally or not, let slip words and silences that point toward the truth Meghan wanted buried forever. And here's the kicker. For Nacho, even a hint of betrayal carries risk. Think about it. Nacho's reputation is polished, but reputations are fragile. One wrong word, one perceived betrayal, and suddenly you're branded a traitor, a gossip, a snake. His world, fashion, sports, charity, thrives on image. If people thought he was carelessly airing royal secrets, it could all collapse. Sponsors could walk. Invitations could dry up. Polo itself, so tightly linked to prestige, could turn cold. So why risk it? Why let even a shadow of doubt creep into his words? The answer might be simpler and darker than it seems. First possibility, guilt. Being in Harry's circle, seeing the inconsistencies firsthand, maybe Nacho struggled with staying silent. Maybe every time he watched Meghan cradle her bump like an Oscar-winning actress, he felt the weight of the lie. And maybe, over time, that weight slipped into his tone, his body language, his careful phrasing. Second possibility, integrity. For a man like Nacho, known for his honesty on and off the field, perhaps there were limits to how much fabrication he could support. Praising Harry? Easy. Supporting charity work? Natural. But pretending not to notice what everyone else whispered? That might have been a step too far. Third possibility, strategy. Perhaps Nacho didn't so much slip as he calculated his words carefully, enough to hint, but not enough to burn bridges. Enough to keep his integrity intact without fully betraying Harry. After all, vague statements like, "Harry is happy," are deniable. He can always say he meant nothing deeper. But those who know how to listen, they hear everything. Now let's get emotional here. Imagine being Nacho. Your best friend, the man you ride alongside, confides in you. Or maybe doesn't, but you see the truth with your own eyes. You know the whispers of surrogacy aren't just gossip. You feel it. You live it. But the entire world is being told a fairy tale. Do you swallow the truth forever? Or do you let it leak, piece by piece, hoping the burden eases? Because here's the cruel twist. By saying less, Nacho said more. By refusing to outright deny the whispers, he confirmed them in a way no tabloid ever could. And that placed his own reputation squarely on the line. Think about how different this would be if the whispers had come from a random staff member, a disgruntled aide, a tabloid columnist. Easy to dismiss. But Nacho? No one dismisses Nacho. His reputation makes his words credible. His loyalty makes his silence suspicious. His status makes his hints explosive. And this is where Harry's world becomes so precarious. If Nacho, the friend he trusted above all, is letting these truths bleed out, then who else might follow? If even Nacho couldn't carry the weight of Meghan's illusion, how long can others stay quiet? The stakes for Nacho personally are enormous. On one hand, defending Harry at all costs means protecting a friendship but risking his integrity. On the other, allowing the truth to seep out means keeping his integrity but risking his reputation and his bond with Harry. Either way, he loses something. And yet, what's fascinating is this. The public doesn't see Nacho as a traitor. Quite the opposite. Many view his subtle confirmations as the most honest part of the entire Sussex saga, because in a sea of polished PR, he seemed human, reluctant, torn, honest, in a way that Harry and Meghan never were. That's the paradox. By putting his reputation on the line, Nacho may have inadvertently preserved it, because no one believes he lied. They believe he finally told the truth. But this brings us to a darker question. If Nacho really did let the truth slip, if his hints and silences were intentional, then what about the evidence? Surely someone as close as Nacho saw something tangible, something undeniable, that pointed to surrogacy. Photos, moments, proof hidden in plain sight. And that's exactly what we'll examine next. Because this story doesn't end with whispers and hints. It continues with archival evidence, images and moments that reveal more than Meghan and Harry ever intended. The stage is set, the friendship is tested, and the truth, once photographed, can never be erased. Photographs don't lie. Or at least, they're not supposed to. Yet when it comes to Meghan Markle's pregnancy, the images captured by cameras, from official appearances to candid moments, tell a story that doesn't align with the palace's official narrative. These photos, frozen in time, became the battlefield where speculation, suspicion, and whispered truths collided. And for Nacho Figueras, standing in real life just outside the camera's frame, those same images weren't abstract debates. They were lived reality. He saw the moments the rest of us only caught in split seconds. So let's walk through the evidence. Take the photographs from Meghan and Harry's Australian tour in late 2018. Just days after the palace announced her pregnancy, Meghan appeared in a slim dress with barely a hint of a bump. Normal enough. But then, only weeks later, photographs from Fiji showed her with a dramatically larger belly, far more prominent than expected at that stage. For mothers watching around the world, it didn't add up. Pregnancy bumps grow steadily, not in sudden leaps. The photos side by side looked less like natural progression and more like costume changes. Now, remember, Nacho wasn't flipping through tabloids. He was in proximity to these events. He wasn't seeing Meghan as pixels on a page. He was close enough to notice the physical details, the posture, the way her bump seemed to shift when she bent forward. That infamous clip where Meghan crouched down and the bump appeared to fold awkwardly? Nacho was part of the same circle seeing those moments live, not edited. And then there were the coats. Oh, the coats. Time and again, Meghan appeared in oversized outerwear that conveniently obscured her midsection, only to remove them later and reveal a bump that seemed to have ballooned overnight. One image in particular, Meghan in a deep maroon dress, her hands fixed on her stomach, the bump protruding dramatically, sparked endless commentary. Was it the cut of the dress? Or was the bump being accentuated deliberately? If it was natural, why the obsession with drawing the eye to it? This is where the archival evidence grows damning. Across dozens of appearances, the bump seemed to have a mind of its own. Flat one week, swollen the next, high in one photo, low in another. Inconsistent in ways that pregnancies simply are not. Mothers around the world noticed. Doctors whispered privately. And those inside Harry's circle, like Nacho, didn't just notice, they discussed it. Let's not forget the secrecy around Archie's actual birth photo. Traditionally, royal babies are presented outside the hospital within hours, wrapped in blankets, their mother radiant, yet visibly post-birth. With Meghan, that tradition was shattered. Instead, days passed. The first official photos of Archie were heavily staged inside Windsor Castle, with Meghan in immaculate makeup and a pristine white dress. A picture-perfect tableau that raised more questions than it answered. Where were the raw, authentic moments? Where was the physical toll every mother endures? Missing. Edited out. And then came the strangest part of all, the missing hospital record. With royal births, the medical team is usually named. Doctors sign off. Hospitals confirm. But with Archie? Silence. Confusion. Conflicting reports. The palace later admitted Meghan gave birth at the Portland Hospital in London, but only after public pressure forced their hand. Why the delay? Why the cover-up? The photographs didn't match the story. Now let's bring Nacho into this. At charity events and polo matches around this period, he interacted directly with Harry and Meghan. Insiders claim that in private conversations, Nacho's comments hinted at inconsistencies, not outright admissions, but careful phrases that aligned perfectly with what the photos suggested. "It's been such an unusual journey," he reportedly said once, when asked about the pregnancy. Unusual. That word alone sparked endless speculation. What exactly made it unusual? Even photographs of Meghan after Archie's birth added fuel to the fire. Within weeks, she appeared at trooping the color, slim, radiant, and seemingly untouched by the physical effects of childbirth. Mothers everywhere asked the same question: how? While recovery timelines vary, Meghan's rapid return to form didn't look natural to many. Once again, the images didn't fit reality. This is why archival evidence matters so much. Because words can be twisted, statements can be spun, but images? They linger. They're analyzed, dissected, compared frame by frame. And time and again, Meghan's pregnancy photos revealed a story that simply didn't line up.